We needed him. We needed the American Indian movement at a very challenging time in our recent history. They knocked the doors down. They forced the oppressor to acknowledge us, and they tried to make them live up to the treaties, international compacts. Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution validates them as the supreme law of the land. During the leadership trials in 1974 with Russel and Dennis Banks, represented by a whole host of America's top legal brains, led by the late William Kunstler, they brought these international documents to the forefront. They paved the way for the next 7 generations. And here we are, at the cusp again of making decisions that will affect the next 7 generations. I come from a beautiful, ancient culture that recognizes and celebrates all of life. It's a very simple, humble equation. We all came down with instructions. The 2-legged, the 4-legged, the water, the winged, and those that live within our grandmother, the earth. We have our relatives, the green things that nourish our bodies, offer us the medicines to maintain these vehicles. The mineral kingdom that offers us their properties to sustain our life and our well-being. All of our relatives are still adhering to those instructions the Creator gave them, except for human. We come from an underworld. Most of our indigenous creation stories speak to that. We are now in the 5th world as we identify it. And in this 5th world is a new energy. It's a female energy. It's refined. It's heightened. It resonates with love, nurturing, compassion. It's a time for us as women. We're the only species that the Creator granted us with the ability to naturally purify every 28 days. Think about that. That's powerful, and that's a responsibility. It's a responsibility that we all have as women, as mothers, as grandmothers, as aunties, as daughters, as wives, as sisters. My late husband often spoke to patriarchy versus matriarchy. For 40 years, he tried to open the hearts, turn the lights on with our people, with the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. He was part of that original delegation that went to the United Nations Geneva, Switzerland, September 1977. The old people, we still had our old people who had never been to a European school. They were still thinking and operating in a beautiful way that we know as connecting the brain with the heart. When you're making decisions with that connection, they're going to be honest, they're going to be pure, they're going to be powerful, they're going to be balanced. These old people gathered in Standing Rock. In 1974, there were over 5,000 of us. And they were given mandates. The American Indian Movement was a young organization. They had lit a fire across Turtle Island. The old people knew that we needed a political arm, an international arm. We needed a seat at the table of nations. So they went. And in September 2007, the Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples was passed. This declaration didn't tie any dollar amount to it. There was no commitment other than acknowledging us as human beings. And yet America, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia refused to sign that document. This is 2007. We're in the 21st century. Under political pressure, over the next several years, one by one, they were coerced, embarrassed into signing this document. This is the ongoing racism. This is the attack that we're still under on all levels. From raping our grandmother to not even acknowledging us as human. This is what we have been up against. This is the oppression, repression, suppression that goes on in this world today. This is why this point in our recent history is so crucial. And in order to heal, we've got to acknowledge these truths. We have to put them on the table. We have to have dialogue so we can let it go and move forward. And we can do this now because we're in the fifth world with the heightened energy. And our brothers and sisters are ready to hear us. They're asking us. Unfortunately, it's the 11th hour, but there's enough of us that are awakened. And a lot of us are women. We as women have been oppressed for 6,000 years, longer than any other race of people. So we have a responsibility now. And it's very simple. We have to start with ourselves. We have forgotten how to nurture ourselves. We have been trying to maintain a balance with our male counterpart. So we continue to overextend. We continue to compromise. And some of us have gotten confused because the patriarch, you look at his governmental structures, you look at his educational institutions, you look at his organized religions, you look at all of his structures, and they're top down. We have no balance with those systems. So they eventually implode from within. And this was one of Russell's messages that he took to the world. In fact, he said, if you want to know what the United States of America, the belly of the beast, what their tactics are, take a look at the page of our history. These policies were first bred and born in Indian country. They were exported to the world, and now they're on the backs of the American people. They didn't live up to Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution that validates our treaties as international documents. What makes you think they're going to honor the U.S. Constitution that is actually designed to keep the U.S. government in check? Because we are sovereigns. We have those rights. They're inherent rights. And look what you've done. You've allowed your rogue government to usurp your rights, one after another, year after year. We come from a people with a beautiful worldview, because it doesn't begin with us and it doesn't end with us. Everything in the universe is holy, sacred, and round. The planets, the stars, the moon, the sun, the raindrops, the human form. We've got to grab a hold of these truths. We've got to grab a hold of our children. That's our greatest responsibility as women. Why have we thrown them away? Why are we allowing the system to put our future leaders on Ritalin? Why are we lining up in those clinics for antidepressants? Why are we allowing our agriculture to be destroyed with genetically modified organisms? Why are we allowing this? Water is sacred. It's our lifeblood. Look what they've done to it. We need help. And we need unity. We need to come together to survive. Because Grandmother the Earth is evolving. She's cleansing. She's tired of all of the disease. And it's very simple. We get on board, or we too cross over. This new energy, it's powerful. It's your thoughts. That's the first step in creation, is what you're thinking. Be careful what you're thinking, because you're creating it. We can open our hearts. We have this perfect DNA. We come in with this beautiful blueprint. Let's remember it. And when we awaken and we become fully connected, like is going to attract like. It's part of the natural, universal laws of the universe. One by one, start with yourself, your family, your clan, your community, your nation, and then the world on out to infinity. I remember my husband sharing this very beautiful analogy. In the early 80s, he and other Lakota reclaimed a portion of their holy land, the Black Hills, the 噚ÄÄ, their point of emergence. Incidentally, when the first aerials were taken of the Black Hills, the image came back as a heart. The Lakota called it the heartbeat of the people. Russell often spoke of those years. He spent 8 seasons living in a teepee, living off the land, taking a dip in that sacred cold pool of water. He said one day he was sitting next to a pine tree, and his first thought was, years from now, a white man would come along, an anthropologist, and say, look at these idyllic people wasting time. They called our contemplating wasting time. In any event, he tossed a pebble in that still lake, and then he watched the ripple effect. The first circle, he began to realize that rock represented his heart. The first circle represented his immediate family. The next, his န့ÄÄ™, then his community, his nation, his people, the world, the connection and the realization that pebble belongs to each one of us because we each have a heart, and our heart affects infinity. That's a wow. That's how important each one of you are. And I'm here to tell you, I've had my challenges, I've had my joys. I have 3 children. I have a granddaughter. I have 7 sisters and brothers. My mother is 87. My father is 92. I come from a long line of strong women and men, medicine men, who carried the medicine, the knowledge, My grandfather, he carried with him our Dene Treaty with the U.S. government in his saddlebags. He never left home without that treaty. He knew what his rights were. My great-grandfather was a medicine man. My grandmothers were weavers, the caretakers of the language, the stories. My mother's a beautiful weaver. I come from the န့ěዀ clan, the Salt clan of the Dene people. The Spaniards called us Navajo. We call ourselves Dene. It translates to the people. In fact, most of our indigenous languages, the name we refer to when describing ourselves translates roughly to something like the people. So I have a responsibility as I stand here. I stand here with my mother, my grandmothers, because I carry their DNA. We call it the little people in our blood. And now the oppressor wants that. They're currently up in Lakota country, and they're getting DNA samplings from our young women, childbearing years. They've ascertained that the Lakota hold a unique chromosome, and they want it. The insanities and atrocities just continue to go on and on and on. But we're here today, this weekend. We're here together with an open heart because we are remembering. We're remembering who we are. And we're remembering our responsibility. And as my husband said, the last couple of years he was with us. And from this high hill of old age, you see life a little differently. Russel's message wasn't just to his people. It wasn't just the indigenous peoples. It was to humanity. He had a lot of comfort in those last years that he was fighting for his life. He had letters from all over the world thanking him for his work, his leadership, his dedication, his sacrifices, so we might have a better opportunity to be human and to reach out to one another. The Lakota have a beautiful word in their language, ዄΗ̈ᴜ. We are all related. And he would often say, doesn't matter what your color is, we honor the 4 sacred colors of the universe: white, black, yellow, and red. You mix those colors together and you get the color brown, the color of the 5th race of people and our grandmother, the earth. In May of this year, I had been mourning for 22 months. I was fractured. There was a part of me that was gone. And I knew something wasn't right. I went in Western medicine to get checked out, only to learn that I had low-grade cancer. Of course, they immediately wanted to start taking organs. I said, no. I'm out of balance. I'm mourning. I'm feeling the stresses of a wife who's lost her partner. I know where to go. I know what to do. I know this is a wake-up call for me to get back into balance. I could hear my husband saying, life is for the living. Don't argue with life. Deal with it. We have a beautiful way in our culture that we mourn for a year. Collectively, with our community and our family, we release the spirit. We had done that. We had honored him from Indian country, from Hollywood to New York City. I was honored to do that. I was honored to participate in that. I was honored that so many people wanted to celebrate his life, his work. But that too left me depleted. There was a public mourning of the leader. And I still needed to mourn my husband, the man. The man that would walk in at 4 p.m. and say, "What's for sup, babe?" Or the man, his favorite time of the day was rising with the morning star, saying his thank you prayers. And in the ÄÄÄ, after that's done, he returns to the bed and gently brushes his wife's hair. We know that hair is sacred. It's attached to our brain. During our mourning, we cut our hair very, very short to lessen those memories. So when your partner brushes your hair gently, lovingly, the most sacred part of the human form, you're going to get your day started off on the right foot. His second favorite part of the day was having his cup of coffee. He liked it lawsuit hot. And he only had 2 cups. And then he'd say to me, "Hun, what's on my agenda today?" And you know, that was how he was able to be fully present in the moment. He didn't want to know what tomorrow was. He wasn't worried about next week or yesterday. He focused on the moment, in the moment today. And that's the only way that we can live life to the fullest, is to show up and be present in the moment. The power, the magic That's where it happens. I want to share with you something that was life-altering for me. A couple of years ago, as we were on this cancer fight, he immediately employed indigenous medicines from Mexico to Canada. There were indigenous ceremonies scheduled from Arizona to Canada. Well, he had, in the end, elected, because he had a tumor the size of an egg that was on a regrowth tonsil that was about to shut off his windpipe. His ability to breathe and eat was severely restricted. By the time he had been diagnosed, it had traveled to his lungs. It was everywhere. And he had a very good 8 months. He had lost his voice for a brief period. But with tomotherapy, it's a type of laser radiation, they were able to shrink that tumor so he had his voice back. You know, somewhere deep inside of me, I knew he was not going without a voice. And so he was committed to this. There was a Dr. Grotto who heads up a number of clinics in Mexico as well as the US. And he has perfected that technique. In fact, he has traveled all over the world teaching it to other oncologists. It's pinpoint, so you go through a tube and it just targets the cancer cells. So Russell was into this. It was a 6-week program, and he was in like the 4th week of it. And one evening I was checking emails, and a request came in, an invitation came in from California. And they were holding a indigenous healing conference. And they had listed the different healers that would be there from all over the indigenous world. And the one that caught my attention was something that we hadn't pursued and we didn't know anything about. And it came from our brothers and sisters down in Peru, the Œঽ indigenous peoples. And their story, as we learned, was that their holy people had warned them of the onset of the European. And they were told to go up into their highest parts of their homeland. And these were the healers of the Incas. And so they had lived up there as they had for eons until the early 90s. And then they were told, given their spiritual direction, to come back down because the younger brothers and sisters needed their abilities and their techniques, their knowledge. So they come out in pairs, a male and a female. They go to large gatherings because they understand how to work with energy. And what they said was that we don't have just one sun that governs our universe, but 3. And so what they do is they energize meteor rocks, lava rocks, and it holds this frequency from the sun. So they agreed to do a personal one-on-one with Russell. He agreed he wanted to go. We traveled there, and they worked on him. The male worked on him. they said that there's a body around the form, the human form, that's 18 inches, and that collects energy. It's dense energy. It may be your energy or other lifetimes, but any event, that had to be cleared in order to begin raising the body's frequency. And so the woman asked me to sit with her outside. They had refused inside accommodations. And so when asked, the host said, what would make you comfortable? And they saw a tent set up in one of the neighbors' yards, and they said, one of those. And of course, this is very loose translation because they only speak their language. And so they set up a tent. They were very happy there. They had grapevines and pear trees and whatnot. And so the woman asked me to sit with her, so I did. So we acknowledged each other, we smiled, we tried to sign language, communicate. She was making these little medicine bundles. They had a big evening with the community at large, and she was making what was necessary for that. We sat there. I lost track of time. And it's something that often happens in our indigenous ceremonies where we lose time because we're in that quantum world that you all would refer to as quantum physics, beyond time and space. And that's how our ancestors are able to enter and direct and instruct, advise the people. So it was very similar to that. And a few minutes later, Russell walked out. I rushed up to him and I said, well, how was it? And he said, how long was I in there? He was a numbers man. He was an accountant by trade, and he loved numbers. And he often said when he traveled, that's how he kept his brain sharp, was he would calculate numbers. And I said, I don't know, but it had to have been at least 30 minutes. And so I said, well, how was it? What happened? And he said, why don't you find out how long I was in there? So I knew that he needed to know this, so I went and found out. He was in there for 1 hour and 45 minutes. And so when I told him, he was surprised. And I said, how long did you think you were in there? He said, about 10, 15 minutes. So he said, I don't know if I experienced it, if I traveled, if I slept. I have no idea, but I know what I experienced. And he described it to me. Well, when we left there, the next day, they asked if he would speak to the audience. And he said yes, he felt good and he wanted to share with them. So he did. And with the mass of people, I actually felt energized. I felt good. I didn't feel depleted. And what I realized was with my time with that grandmother, she was resonating at such a high frequency that she caused my heart to expand and open. And it was a real beautiful lesson and awareness of how we can open and expand our heart. And it's all with that love energy, that heightened frequency. We got back to Scottsdale, and Russell went into that tube and absolutely shattered that $1 million machine because his energy had been increased to such a high frequency. It took him 3 days and numerous technicians, and then they decided they couldn't repair it. They had to order a new piece of equipment. So that's just a little bit about our energy and the power of that. And that's where we're at today, is to harness that energy collectively. And the easiest way to access it is from heart to heart. And it's the domino effect. I want to thank all of you for your time, your attention, your love, your good energy, your support. I am a witness to the power of prayer. We had prayers from all over the world. They continue. And the strength and the love and the hope and the realization that we're all here right now for a reason. And the sooner we step up to that responsibility, the more beautiful of a world that we can create. Thank you.